It sounds pretty straightforward, and it probably is to a certain extent, but we're going to delve into this now with Harold Hillman, our executive coach. G'day, Harold.
G'day, Roman. How are you?
Oh, look, I'm well, and sometimes do people have to be told things about themselves they're not aware of?
Yes, very often that is the case. It is tough for if you're on a team, and particularly if your leader is coming across in a way that is not very impactful, or it's having sort of negative impact, and the person intends well, but they just can't see some things that other people can see. It does become critical, certainly to success in business, for a person to be reasonably self-aware around how other people experience them.
So the self-awareness in your personal life, is it really that different to the self-awareness in the business world?
It's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about connection and the ability to be able to influence people. So that's important at work, and it's certainly important in our personal life in terms of believing that we're having maximum impact. And so sometimes people, again, the best of intentions, but because they can't see that gap that other people can see, sometimes they end up wondering. A person who sometimes is confused why people seem to be angry at the end of a conversation, or people seem to be detached, or they're just not getting that emotional sort of connection that they desire. There's two components to self-awareness. One of them is sort of in the moment. And so if I'm in an interaction with you and I see you detaching a bit or holding back, the first thing that I would really want to do is ask myself, is there something about my demeanor or something about the way I'm coming across that's causing Roman to detach a bit? A person who lacks self-awareness would say to themselves, what's wrong with him? As opposed to, I wonder if maybe I spoke in a different tone, or maybe even sat down versus hovering over a person, if that would make a difference. And so one component of self-awareness is just being able to self-regulate in the moment to be able to get the desired outcome.
Does body language and tone and delivery, is all that a part of the way people perceive you? But how do you control that?
It's a big part of how people perceive you. 70% of a person's perception on another person is often going to be based on the nonverbals. So what you say is important, but people are actually sort of taking in the whole person. So if you are trying to instill confidence, for example, in a team, but your body language conveys a tentativeness or a worry or nervousness and those types of things, it can detract from the words that are actually coming out of your mouth. Sometimes leaders will say, hey, I believe in empowerment, but yet they hover all over the team and they don't give people a chance to actually do anything on themselves. And so that would be an indication of how lack of self-awareness can actually cause negative impact.
Body language, for example, is something you can't control. If I'm feeling defensive, I'll cross my arms.
Yeah.
So can you manage the way you are perceived by people?
You can. It goes to the heart of whether or not you can, be authentic in how you come across, whether that be at work or at home. We do have to make adjustments, and a lot of times we make more adjustments at work than we do at home. But the idea is, are you being true to who you really are in terms of self-awareness? If people perceive that you are inauthentic, it's another one of those wobbly factors around trust. We do have to make adjustments, but just staying true to who you are is important as well.
As a boss, do you have to have a pretty thick skin and almost lose that self-awareness because you've got to hire, fire, do all that nasty and good stuff? You've just got to harden up, or is that just an old-fashioned way of thinking?
It's you do have to bring it as it. I believe the philosophy of Jack Welch, who was the previous chief executive of General Electric last century, sort of the CEO of the century, basically. He had this ethical premise that's set under leadership, and that is that as a manager, It is really an ethical obligation to be candid with people. That takes it takes a little bit of skill in that sense that people do like to, there's a human need to be needed, and people like to be affirmed for what they do. And so part of self-awareness is just understanding that even though you do have to make tough calls and have tough conversations and those types of things, also be mindful of the fact that people do like affirmation.
We're talking self-awareness with Harold Hillman, our executive coach. Right, personal and business self-awareness. I know it's not going to be easy to answer, but are women better at doing this than men?
Women are, in general, more self-aware than men. And self-awareness is the fundamental sort of foundation, if you will, for emotional intelligence. And so in general, women are more emotionally intelligent than men. And we, girls are just better. We allow our young daughters, to come and have conversations with us about how they feel. There's a correlation between how you think and how you feel, and the ultimate impact of that on other people. And so we allow our daughters to talk more about feelings. We don't allow our sons to talk about feelings as much. That's something that it's sort of a general thing, growing up in the U.S., growing up in New Zealand, but in New Zealand in particular, my experience has been that there are a lot of boys who then grow into men who believe that feelings are a bad thing.
Do you think this is an issue for our young people heading into adulthood? Is this why we have some of the highest rates of self-harm and depression in the OECD?
I absolutely believe that is something fundamental that sits under that. New Zealand, in some estimates, comes in first or second in developed nations for teenage suicide, particularly amongst males, our teenage sons. And a big part of that is that, particularly during adolescence, when emotions are surging all over the place, is probably the craziest period of anyone's life is adolescence. And sometimes we don't let our sons sit down with us and actually have conversations about how they're working through issues, their feelings, what is anxiety, what's it feel like to actually be depressed, what's the correlation between how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling. Again, we have those conversations with our daughters. We typically don't with our sons, and that's something that New Zealand culturally needs to get under.
Harold Hillman, executive coach with the Sigmoid Curve Consulting Group. Always wonderful to catch up with you.
Thank you, Roman.